Hey there guys, first of all I would like to say thank you for hearing me and for this opportunity. This video I decided to divide on three parts. First will be about who I am and about my path. The second will be about how my workflow is structured. The third will be about my pipeline and my thoughts during the work in progress. Okay, part number one, who I am. So, my name is Evgeniy and I'm 39 years old and I am a concept artist who works in the game industry remotely as a freelancer or on a contract basis. Among my clients are such studios as Marvel, Riot, or Valve. You can find my works on various social media and websites such as Instagram, Twitter, or ArtStation. Well, you can choose any way you like to consume the content. Okay, next, I would like to tell you more about my journey as an artist and how I got into the industry. I think this is an important part of every artist story because some events may have influenced their personality, skills, and style. And you can see that not every artist is just born talented and becomes a great artist from day one of his life. That every artist has to overcome certain challenges, and perhaps all of this will help someone who thinks he or she has no talent and that he or she is not very good at anything. Well, at least in my time, it helped me. I've been drawing since I was a kid. I really like drawing dinosaurs and stuff like that. I drew from different gum stickers and books about prehistoric times. In a regular school, I was better than other kids, but when I got into the art school, I was much worse than other students and I barely handled art classes. I was constantly getting bad grades, and after a couple of years, I was expelled. By the way, I got into the art school only from the second attempt. Here you can see some of my artworks and my level being an art school student. And as you guys may see, I was expelled not without the reason. About the year 2000, after I was expelled, my older brother gave me a book by Boris Vallejo. And I was literally shocked because for the whole of my life, I've been thinking that fine art was just only about landscapes, portraits, still lifes, and things like that, you know. That kind of stuff that you can find in museums, those kind of typical classical artist. I liked it, but when you are a teenager, it's not that kind of stuff that catches your eye and makes you thrilled. Anyway, when I saw Boris's artwork, I was amazed because I saw a lot of awesome images with pumped dudes, sexy chicks, and different monsters with a cool, smooth rendering. It's not that kind of rendering you usually see in classic artworks with brush strokes and stuff like this, which is definitely great, but you know, it's more like video game covers or movie posters, which I absolutely loved being a teenager. So up until 2003, I used to draw a lot of things inspired by Boris. However, in most cases, you can see already that my works have lack of creativity and design. Because most of my things I just drew and copied from Boris's artworks and from some various photos. I just didn't know how to create something new, something unique. It's mostly just muscular bodies and that's it. And after I came back from the military service and worked from shoe store security guard to the driver of a taxi cab, after a couple of years, around 2007, I discovered the existence of digital art and the game industry. Well, from that time, I started my miserable attempts to get into CG as a 2D artist. I didn't know anything about concept art at all back then. I bought a Wacom tablet and started to draw all sort of things, but again I ran into the same problem that I was having before. the conceptual and design part. I just didn't know how to finish this or that character. I didn't know how it works, how design and concept art work in general. I didn't know how to make it interesting, what styles and settings there were, what are the rules of concept art, and what are the rules for environment concept art. Oh, and I tried to start working as an artist at 2 different companies, but after about months and a half at each, I was fired. And after all that, I started to think that if I couldn't go through this door, maybe I could go through another one. And I decided to start learning 3D. Back in the days, there was no YouTube. There were only articles and text tutorials with some images. It was a time when you could hardly find anything useful, especially for industry purposes. So yes, here you can see some of my works that I did during my learning period. After that, I had the opportunity to get into the industry by working for an outsourced game studio in my hometown. That studio was called Sperasoft, and it still exists to this day. But since I had no experience as a 3D artist, I had to complete test work to get there. By the way, that's where I first saw the benefits of being a 2D artist, even if you work in a 3D field. I worked there about 3 years as a 3D artist and lead artist on MMO Star Wars The Old Republic by BioWare. But I got recommended to another studio by one of my coworkers. It was a small indie game studio and they were just looking for a lead artist. In 2011, I quit Sperasoft and joined this studio. I quickly became an art director there because it turned out that they didn't have a person in charge who could handle all the visual for the game. For about the next 5 years, we were doing a small iOS game called Lost Socks Naughty Brothers. The video of it you can see on your screen right now. Somewhere in the middle of the development of the project, a colleague of mine showed me this dude who had become a very good artist practically from the scratch. And I was shocked because, you know, for my whole life, I've been thinking that in order to be a good artist, you had to have a talent. And finally, I saw my chance to become one. Something I had always dreamed of. It turned out that the secret is very simple. It's just about practice. Lots of practice. He drew every day. He drew from photos, he drew still lifes, he drew sketches, he drew anatomy and everything like that. And after we finished the game, I decided to quit my job as an art director and try to be an artist for the second time. At the end of 2016, I started studying and practicing. Over the next 2 years, I did a lot of self-study and also took several courses. In between studying, I was working a bit as a freelancer 3D artist. Nothing fancy, just something that helped me to pay my bills. I was trying to do the same thing as this dude. As you can see here, over a couple of years, I have accumulated a lot of different studies. Plus, I was also making copies from other artists, from their work. I tried to understand how they think, the design, the shapes, maybe some of the colors. I mostly copied characters and weapons. And by the end of the 2017, here you can see that the level I reached in my studies that I was doing from photos and by studying anatomy. During the period and After that period, from time to time, I kept trying to do some designs, some characters, some scenes, and I was seeing a progress, and it motivated me because I started to imagine how good I could be if I kept practicing and learning. When I was confident enough in my level, I decided to take some courses. For example, this pre-recorded course by Sam Nilsson is about lighting, and it turned out to be very useful, at least for me. I also decided to take a couple of concept art courses, among other things. I wasn't really thinking of becoming a concept artist at the time. I just wanted to learn it in a bunch with everything. The first concept art course was from Smirnov School in 2017, and the second one was from New Art School by Dmitry Klushkin in 2018. So yeah, after this whole journey, I started to draw more for myself, and you can see how my level has changed. My first client was in 2018. It was Hothead Games. I was doing design exploration for new heroes in an iOS game called Hero Hunters, and I'm very grateful for this opportunity because it was my first job as a concept artist, and also I had a lot of freedom. I'm proud of these works, but even then I started to notice one of my problems that had been haunting me for a long time. I just couldn't make the design more detailed. I just didn't know how to do it. All my attempts to add more details resulted in the design getting too messy and noisy. From then on, I always kept the idea in my head that I need to focus on that. So throughout my career, I have always tried to become good at this. After that, with partial success, I started to have other clients, but when I didn't have any, I have been trying to keep busy studying and learning new things. Unfortunately, I can show you more works from clients because they are under NDA still. But for example, I did several designs for Spellbreak, Mailman skin for Fortnite. But the real start in my career started after this work of Wolf Knight from this series. It was an outsourcing studio, and they liked these sketches, and they wanted to do characters illustrations for the cards in Valorant Beta. It was a strange experience because I don't consider myself an illustrator, you know. Okay, the second part, my workflow. In this section, I will walk you through my workflow and my thought during the process. So if you are working on a project, whether it is a game, a movie, or a personal project, first of all, we need to define what we are working with. It all starts from the project and its final goal, whether it is a character design, prop design, or environment design. There has to be a brief. You have to know that setting is, what style is, what the mood board of the project is, and what the restrictions are. And that's really important because it all starts from there. And if I do a personal piece, when I draw for myself, I usually go from the opposite. I go from the final image in my head, the final impression. It could be a character inspired by something or someone. I see what I want, how it should feel. It is if you, as a human being, are teleported into some fantasy world, just like that. We don't know how, and we see a whole new world and a character in it. We don't know anything about that world. We don't know anything about that character. We just see, but we feel particular emotions. Okay, I know that I have to draw a character with a specific idea, design, in a specific setting. Once you have a brief, once you have a direction, you start collecting references. References for the mood board, for the idea. The first thing I do is go into my personal collection. Over all these years of being a concept artist, I have accumulated many different PureRef collections, divided by theme, setting, and project. I then continue my research on projects I know that are similar to the one I'm working on right now. Then I go through our art books. Some of the art books I have in digital format, PDF, and some I have in a physical form in my bookshelf. After gathering materials from the previous sources, I go to the Pinterest. I have a few collections there as well. Already looking at all this material while researching, I usually start generating ideas. The most interesting ones I try to write down. When creating a new PureRef sheet, I try to categorize all the references into sections, for example, poses, style, ideas, etc. Here you can see some mood boards for my personal projects. You can see the logic. Now you can see how I write down some theses, some goals. So you always see them, focus on them, and always keep in mind the main points you should aim for. After the research, I move onto the drawing process. I have two different ways to start this next step. The first one is thumbnails, and the second one is sketches. And which one you will be using is depending on the task and the client. Some clients prefer to work with some more loose sketches, but some already have a specific direction and requirements for the character. Therefore, they prefer to use more elaborate sketches. Thumbnails are suitable for when the task is more vague and undefined, and thus all this focus will be on the general construction, silhouette, and idea rather than on specific designs. You are working mostly with large and medium-sized shapes, and the number of such thumbnails starts from 5. This is, of course, an approximate number. Sketches are used for more precise work when you know the direction. Perhaps you have some references from the client and they know what they want. In this case, the focus goes to the character itself, the style of the clothing, the character's profession, the setting. This way you're basically working with large, medium, and small shapes. No fine details or textures, but some hints of materials where it's important. Usually the number of sketches does not go beyond 5. I prefer 3. At this stage, I'm trying to think more about directions, whether you're working on thumbnails or whether you're working on sketches. You have to be more diverse and try to explore different directions. For example, let's take a ninja. One of them will be a cyber ninja. Second will be classic ninja. The third might be a ninja in the hood. The fourth might be a ninja in sci-fi combat suit. And you have to make that idea clear and push it as far as you can, but at the same time stay in the theme of the ninja or whatever else it might be. At this point I can start with anything. I just start from some element I see in references, but the more I design, the more I can move away from the reference. Maybe I can jump to next reference, or I can start to see my own idea in it as well. After this stage, when you will receive feedback from the client or maybe from yourself, when you already have something to work with and have narrowed down the direction, then comes the second stage of the research, where you need to gather more specific references. For example, boots, belts, gloves, etc. I do believe this is important, especially for the final design, for the details and believability, because we can't know anything in the world and how everything works. Even if you take a simple object like a cowboy hat, for instance, and try to draw it using your imagination or memory, you will see that your versions will lack just the right details that make the hat believable, and it may also not be like a real hat. If you try to make another round but with references, you will see how many things there are and you didn't even think of. Sometimes I just watch videos about making some things, how things work and how things are made. For example, once I watched a video about making a saddle for a horse. Usually when I work on refinements, I copy more from references that I did in the previous step, because now it's not about the design and the idea itself, and I can afford to copy real close. Of course, sometimes you can use them just as a base to create something new. For example, you can make sci-fi boots using regular boots, but even then you might need a different references for the sci-fi gadgets that can be attached to those boots. Another benefit of using this method is that you are expanding your own visual library, and I hope I don't need to tell you what you can do with it. There you can see my treasures, my collections, and how many boards I currently have. These are my PDF files that I mentioned previously, divided by themes, settings, or projects. For example, here you can see a small part of my military collection. There are goggles, helmets, gas masks, vests, armor pads, and all that kind of stuff. Another big collection that I'm proud of is my anatomy collection. I collected it during my anatomy studies, and see how huge it is. And here you can see a small portion of it and the logic of the layout of the images. I arranged the images from top to bottom according to the logic of the human body. At the top you can find references of the head, neck, ears, etc. And at the bottom you will find references for legs, knees, or feet. And even within each section I also separate these images into subsections by muscle groups. So yes, references are truly important, especially when you are not as creative as I am. So the next phase is the refinement stage, the stage where you're implementing all the feedback with all the references and your skill sets. In this step, I try to make a design as close to the final as possible, but in a loose way, because there might be some more changes from the client, so you don't need to polish your concept right now. At this stage, it is very often the case that you will have to make more defined shapes and design elements just from the spots and strokes that you have made at the previous sketching stage. So here it is important for having the skills to generate and design shapes. When you can play with the geometry, with the working mechanical parts, clothes, stitches, and stuff like that. The skill that helps you make them more logical, believable, and interesting. Yeah, it could take some time, of course. But after all that, if everything is good, here comes a more easy and more relaxed phase, at least for me. When you do the final render with materials and shapes, you just make them the whole design complete. You make every part start working together as a whole picture, the whole design. After you finish the main design of the character, there might be some additional concept art to do. For example, props, weapons, or back view. And I found the back view to be the most challenging of all of these. During the process, sometimes you have to make changes to the front view design. Most of the time at this step, I prefer to work in strokes rather than line work because it is easier to see and move larger shapes, and it is like you're sculpting or modeling. In this section, I will walk you through my pipeline. Here, I will be showing you two different methods. One is my old method, which is more suitable for beginners, while my latest current method would be for more experienced artists. So let's get started with this character first. Like I have mentioned before, this is a great example of how I go from the image in my head to a completed design. The original idea was that this is a huge knight in elephant style armor, and it's a mix of goldish metal and ivory. I didn't have a specific design in my head, I just had an idea, a vision of some parts of his armor and nothing else. And yeah, I started working from thumbnails. As you can see, I have been trying to focus more on silhouettes and ideas, just like I told you before. I tried to explore different directions and body types. I tried to make them as far apart from each other as possible, but still staying within the same idea. At this stage, I already started to see some elements that I liked and I wanted them to be in my final design. For example, here you can see those pauldrons with elephant faces and trunks. After the thumbnails, I moved on to the next step, where I decided to determine his body type first. From what I remember, I was thinking of making not just one character, but a series of characters, where each of them would have their own animal-inspired armor. So as you can see, I made 3 body types that represent the character classes in a game. For example, the tank, the warrior, and the range. Based on the body of this huge dude, I drew over the design of his armor using the best parts from the previous step. I tried to keep the elephant symbol in every element of his armor design. For example, you can take a look at his forearm armor, and it shows a stylized elephant foot. When I'm done with the sketch, I move on to the next step with a number of options where I have been trying to make small changes and to see which ones are working the best. As you can see, the changes are minor, as I didn't change any big shapes or anything like that. I was just experimenting with elements I wasn't confident with, and I just wanted to try different ways of designing them. When I was satisfied with the design, I choose one and started drawing line art on top of it. The most challenging part is the beginning, when you only have a white canvas with a semi-transparent sketch. Because as a perfectionist, I tend to make everything perfect, especially in the first place. And I believe this is a big mistake, as it will constrain you, also take a lot of time, but most importantly, the result will not be as great as you expect it to be. That's why I'm trying to force myself to do some more sketchy and rough lines. First of all, it looks more live and not like dead CG, you know. Another advantage of this type of drawing is that you can freely change shapes and flow, which allows you to better focus on shapes and design in general, which is the final goal of it all. I know some artists are using different method where they do multiple layers of line drawing, where the first layer will be rough and, for example, the third will be the final, precise and accurate one. But I always lean towards being more rough, not perfect, and yet for some reason I always ended up getting comments like, "Oh wow, how clean." By the way, during this stage with the line art, sometimes you have to do some callouts and do some research for other elements like weapons, shoulder pads, or other view for some elements to understand the shapes better. After the line art, there is a step with the colors and color variations, but in this particular example, I didn't do any color options because I already had the colors in my initial idea, and I had already established the colors in my previous step with the sketch. When the color fills are finished, I proceed to the shading phase. Yes, I used to divide this stage into several sub-stages. Here I just do the shading without lighting and ambient occlusion. The advantage of this method is that you can focus more on just what you're doing right now. For example, I was only thinking about how the light works on shapes. In this method, I used a layer with multiply mode. I made a rectangular fill with the layer locked and added some sample of color tone for full shadow somewhere in the corner of that layer. That way I could always pick the shadow color using the eyedropper tool. And yeah, for this method you have to change the eyedropper so that it doesn't sample from all layers but only from the current layer. That way it can only sample color from the working layer and you didn't have to worry about anything else. Here is what it looks like without blending mode. And as you can see, there are some colors here, but note that I only did them after the shading was done, just to make the whole picture not dull, gray and dirty. The next step, in my case, would be the path with ambient occlusion. There is nothing special about this, except that you will have to focus more on large shapes to help the viewer understand the relationship of the shapes to each other. For example, I'm trying not to put ambient occlusion on every single concave or cavity. I'm just trying to show the places where the shapes have more depth and more distance between each other, so that they don't seem to be stuck together. That way it helps to understand the volume. After ambient occlusion, I move on to the cast shadow path. Also nothing special here either, just another layer with multiply mode where I keep focusing on the relationship of the shapes, but using the shadows that are dropped by the shapes on each other, continuing to maintain all the design and volume. So the next step that I usually continue to work with is highlights. The highlights are created in the same way as the shadows. While there I used a layer with multiply mode, here I was using an adjustment layer with levels and a mask, but you can also use a regular black fill layer with screen or light and blending modes and just use it white color to paint the highlights. And as you may have already guessed, here we are continuing to focus, but this time on lighting and glossy materials, especially materials like metal. Here you can see how it looks without using any blending mode. By the way, this mask is exactly what I meant when I was talking about using a black fill layer with screen or lighting modes. This mask can easily be used this very layer. Somewhere after the highlights, I was adding a layer of overpaint where I was doing a couple of small edits and adding a couple of colors. Sometimes, if I want the final image to pop out, then I will add a rim light. The principle is the same as for the other rendering layers. Again, it's all about focusing on drawing the light, but this time it's just from a different angle, from behind. Just try to focus, just try to think about how the lights interact with the shape. And back in the day, I was doing a final stage where I merged all the layers and using the dodge and burning tools, I was trying to add more contrast and emphasize the upper body, especially the head. In a nutshell, you just pick a big soft brush and make a few strokes with one tool and then with another one. That's it for this character and for this pipeline. So, next character and next the pipeline. This one is more similar to my last pipeline, and it might be a bit more challenging for the beginners because here I try to not use layers and keep everything together in one layer. Line drawing, shading and colors. I started to using this method not too long ago. I use it because often you have this problem where line drawing is quite limited as a tool, especially when we're talking about shapes. It's very difficult to define and generate shapes using only line. So sometimes I was forced to use shading along with line, so I had to use at least two layers, which wasn't as convenient as you can imagine. That's why I decided to learn this new method. It was really difficult at the first, but as with other learning processes, it gets easier over time. To be honest, today I'm trying to not use a line as much as I used to, and sometimes I even try to avoid using it or at least keep it down in some places. Yes, here you can see the same method, same mood board that you already saw in the previous chapter where I was talking about my workflow and about references. So it was for this very series of works that I made this mood board. Here I have determined a few important things that I used as a key points for this character. I have split this mood board into three columns, where the first is role, the second is the form, and the third is the mood. Mood is the emotion you feel when you are looking at the character, their mood and attitude, their character. Okay, this is a great example of another approach I'm using from time to time, where I don't do thumbnails, but rather lean towards a more precise sketch, because I already know the direction that I wanted to go, because this was the third robot in this series, and each robot I wanted to do the different styles. Yeah, and this particular style is more of a chunky old tech droid, something in the style of Ashley Wood's robots, you know. Also, during that period of my studies, I was starting to think about the fact that I was having some issues with the use of perspective, so I decided to take it a step further and started to use perspective boxes like this, for example, just to get them right in terms of perspective rather than the flat orthographic view that I was using when I was working with Manticore games. Yes, this is much easier to design this way, but it doesn't look as cool or impressive in my opinion. So in the first phase of the sketching, I was just playing around with lines. First, I was focusing more on the silhouette and the proportions, because I believe this is the most important part of every character, especially when it comes to creatures or robots, non-anthropomorphic body types. As you can see here, I didn't pay much attention to the line itself. I was just thinking about the design. That's why it looks so messy. But when you know what you are doing, you don't bother with anything that doesn't help you in the particular step. It comes with the practice. In the next step, I was adding colors and some other details. I also added customized paint because this series was about a couple of bandits, where one of them is a punk girl and the other one is her robot, which she customized to her own. So I tried to add some punk stuff on it, like these rivets and paint, of course. But in this robot I didn't do graffiti or anything like that because I already did it in the previous two robots. So there I decided here I decided to do kind of sci-fi theme like Star Wars or something like that. Once I have a sketch with an idea, I proceed to the development and refinement phase, where I just do more drawing, cleaning shapes and trying to understand the logic of the constructions, especially the joints. And in this phase it's very important to be brave, to play with shapes and not be afraid to change things. It's similar to the work of a sculpture when you just play with the clay and try to add or subtract something and change the scale, if we are talking about 3D sculpting. At this stage I discovered that I like to work with strokes rather than lines, because you can see different ideas in this mess. Here's an example of how I am moving from a loose sketch to more precise shapes and design. I'm just going from the general to the specific. First of all, I try to define perspective in major shapes, and when the major large shapes are done, you just add small shapes to them, and you may have noticed that I try to add a rough render that helps you understand the shapes and materials better. This is what it looks like after the refinement is complete, before I jump into the rendering process. And as you can see, I already have some rendering done in the design. But in the rendering phase I wanted to add more volume, materials and hints of textures, and of course make it look cool. Also, before moving on rendering, I usually add a few extra layers with decals or patterns. Here it's a custom coloring done by a girl. Nothing fancy, just layers with some blending mode or opacity. Now the rendering. After all this, I'm just adding a simple render. As you can see, I'm now using a much less complex rendering method than I used to. The one I was showing you with the Elephant Knight example. There are only two layers here, one for the shadows and shading, and one for light and glassy materials. Sometimes I also add an extra layer with rim light. The principle is the same as for the rendering path. Also, when everything is done, you can add some post effects. For example, here I added a slight bloom effect. And it's also worth to mention that the first robot in this series took me 9 days to complete, and the third took me 4. This shows that when you start to draw something new that you haven't drawn before, it takes longer. But after a few works in the same direction, in the same style, you will notice that the time tends to decrease. And what used to take 10 days can now take 3 days. So just keep that in mind and don't get frustrated when learning something new. Okay, that's it for this one. Here I'm going to tell you about how I design human characters, but the process is pretty much the same as the previous one with the blue robot. So you can Also see my mood board here, as well as my goals and other things I had to keep in mind while working on this soldiers and veteran series. Here I have listed the main goals of the project in terms of practice. I also have a few points in terms of art direction and a bit of descriptive information for each character. As I did for the Alpha Knight character, I started with the body. I defined his body type and his posture. I believe that pose is very important in portraying a character's personality. The body sketch is pretty rough and it just helps to design the outfit, so it will be overlaid with another layer with lines. And as you can see, I also have a perspective box here that helped me draw the character in the perspective. After all that, I go to the design stage where I design the outfit on top of the body. Again, like with the blue robot, I also try to be more loose and focus more on the design, proportions and things like that. Another reason I do this because I know that in the next stage of refinement with colors and rendering, I will change and clarify things. As I mentioned, I found this method more convenient for exploring and designing things. Here, as you can see, I have color fills, and again, just like with the robot, I just go through each part and try to refine it. Rendering, generating shapes, making patterns and stuff like that. That's it for this character. That's about it, and I would like to conclude with a few last words about my experience working with clients and what I do now in my spare time. In my entire professional career as a concept artist since 2018, I have never once written to someone, to some studio, to find a job or freelance. After my first client in 2018, there was a big pause and there were not so many clients. Just small freelance gigs from different outsourcing studios. And this period of silence I tried to use in my advantage and kept practicing and doing different cool things and posting. And the more I post, the more I get noticed. Eventually I got noticed by my next client. So just keep practicing, make cool stuff and post it. As for the clients, I usually work with well-known studios from the US. And it's more pleasant experience for me at the moment because they trust you as a professional. The feedback is not critical and harsh. They always support you and give you adequate feedback. On the other hand, my experience with studios from Russia, China, or even Europe has not been very good, unfortunately. Also, I would like to tell you a little bit about feedback. There was a period of time in my early years when I didn't handle feedback very well. But then one day, at some point of my career, I started to see it as a challenge. That is, you try to find a solution to the problem and you see it not as a critique, but as an opportunity to come up with a design solution. Another great advantage of working with various strong studios is that you can get a chance to work with cool and famous artists from those studios. And it's a great opportunity to learn from them. I always try to learn from their feedback. It's like a lesson that you get paid for. Isn't that great? But even though I always have a client to work with, I don't forget about my education. As an artist, I'm always trying to learn something new, like 3D or even AI. And of course, I continue to develop my 2D skills as a concept artist, and I highly encourage you to do the same. There is no endpoint where you sit back and say, okay, I'm an artist and I'm good. It's never-ending journey, and that's the beauty of it. Okay guys, I think this is it for this video, and thank you for your time, and I really hope you like it, and see you next time. Bye.